I believe that everybody has a story, and I'm fascinated to hear them. So come with me as we take a walk down Fascination Street. Welcome back, Streetwalkers. This episode is with filmmaker and podcaster Vincent Caldoni. In this episode, we talk about what fed Vincent's filmmaking passion from an early age. We talk about his full-length feature film, Contactee, which is available right now, free for Amazon Prime members. And then we get into his podcast, The Shocking Details, both how he got connected with his co-host and what the show's about. I've never missed an episode of this show, and I don't plan to. Also, Vincent shares some really cute stories from the Oregon Zoo, which he works at there in Portland. This was recorded during all the self-distancing due to the coronavirus outbreak. So if that is over by now, woohoo. If not, damn it. But either way, this is my conversation with filmmaker and podcaster Vincent Caldoni. Yeah, talk to me, yeah. Welcome to Fascination Street Podcast, Vincent Caldoni. How you doing today, Vincent?
I'm doing pretty well. It's an honor to be here.
Oh, well, I am honored that you are honored, and together we're honored squared.
Holla.
So the way this is going to work, Vincent, is we're going to get to know you, all right? The way I like to start out generally is, why don't you tell me where you were born and raised, man? Where'd you grow up?
I grew up on the mean streets of North and Northeast Portland.
Gross. So you haven't taken a shower in 30 years?
Well, it would have been longer than that. You know, Portland's an oddball place. It's a hard place to get your mind around if you're not from Portland, I think. The place I was born into was much more of an industrial town, and it's kind of morphed over the years to this artistic center and has now become this, I don't know, sort of yuppie haven, which if you think about it, it's really fast. I mean, I'm really only talking about from the 80s through today. And I think after COVID and the recession, it's going to be a whole new kind of town.
Think so, huh?
Yeah, I really do. I think it's going to be a very different place. I think we'll look back at the Portlandia era like, wow, that used to be Portland, huh?
I've never been to Portland, but from what I understand, Portland is the Austin of Oregon.
I've only been to Austin once, and I was literally months from turning 21, so I don't think I could really get my brain around Austin the way that someone who can really go and see the, you know, all the stuff to see down on 6th Street and stuff. But yeah, I think they have a lot in common. Although, if I'm honest with you, I think Austin is actually an even better place for the art.
Gross.
And I say this with all love for my hometown. I think it's overrated as a place for arts and the arts scene.
That is hilarious. I've lived in San Antonio my whole life with the exception of about 18 months where I lived in Louisville.
Okay.
And Austin is my least favorite city on the planet.
Oh, really?
I can't stand Austin. So it's gross that now I have no reason to ever go to Portland because Austin's better. Ugh.
I'm not going to lie to you. I love my hometown. It's deep in my heart. I have no idea why we have tourists. I don't know why anyone would spend their vacation here.
Really?
No, I really don't. Maybe as it's just sort of a home base to go explore the natural areas around Portland.
Right.
But it really is just a city. Like when you get down to it, there's not a lot of things here that you wouldn't find in any other major American city.
Gotcha. My best friend's parents moved to, I think, downtown Portland.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, like maybe a year and a half ago or something. And boy, were they surprised the past 6 months when they would look out their window and see the city on fire at their feet. So that was cool.
Oh, those poor people. Yeah, this is nothing surprising to me. Portland's always been like that. We love the chance to pitch a fit. George H.W. Bush named our city Little Beirut.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what did you want to be when you grew up, man?
I had a real interest in the sciences when I was a kid.
All of them?
I'm talking like a little kid. I didn't really know one science from the other or the difference between science and engineering. And once I got into that, I realized that I was more interested in thinking about science than doing science.
That makes sense.
I had this other stream of interest in my life, which my grandfather was a big influence on my life. And he was an early VHS pioneer, and he would tape everything and anything he could off of the television, particularly classic films. And we'd sit around and watch that. So when I talk about myself as a filmmaker, it's not just so much, I think, because I make movies, which I do. I had several films come out.
That's sort of implied in the title, right?
Yeah, but I think there are a lot of people out there who are like, I'm a filmmaker, and they like haven't made their first film yet, or they've just kind of done some little experiments with their phone.
Oh, well, then I'm an astronaut.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I jumped one time. No, but I mean, I've been making films since the 90s and been in film festivals. But yeah, that really sparked an interest in me, not just in film, but in storytelling, which is why it was pretty natural for me to get into things like podcasting, because I really love just the idea of storytelling, especially if you can tell it with audio or visual cues. I think by the time I was a teenager, that was my obsession, and I haven't managed to let it go yet.
So you attribute your desire to get into filmmaking directly to those times where you and your dad would watch those classic films on pirated VHS?
Yeah, I didn't think of it as pirating. It was actually my grandfather. But yeah, definitely. He'd let me stay up late and we'd be watching, Tyrone Power movies and classic film noirs and stuff. And I think it was a way for him to connect with the English language and American culture. And it kind of, seeing it through that lens, taught me to think about the language of visual storytelling, right? That if you put three shots together, it becomes a Pythagorean theorem of first shot is the setup, second shot gives you the context you need, and the third shot pays it off. And if you use that formula to go through even pretty boring scenes in well-made films, you'll learn even more about the story being told and the way it's being told and what the creators behind it wanted to show you. And that's one of those moments for me. I was probably 11 or 12 years old, and that just really lit my brain on fire. And I was like, I have to do this. I have to be one of the people doing this.
So you sound, with all this one shot, two shot, three shot Pythagorean nonsense, did you go to school for filmmaking? Or are you just that much of a nerd?
Yeah, I'm more that much of a nerd. No, I have a degree in digital media.
I don't know what that means.
It doesn't mean anything. That's what I learned when I graduated. It's sort of both. So I went to a program. We did study like film and stuff, but I was sort of hedging my bets in the hopes that I might be able to work in like an ad agency or something like that, more as a more stable career, as opposed to shooting the moon and going to film school, which actually makes me sound better than I am. I was rejected from every film school in the United States and Canada. So
that's not true. Nobody gets rejected from film school.
That's untrue. It's actually pretty tough to get into film school.
What?
Yeah.
Kevin Smith got into film school.
He went to a film school in Vancouver that is non-accredited,
right,
and he dropped out.
I knew that he dropped out. It's not accredited?
Yeah, I forget what they call that. It's like the Vancouver Film Institute. And I looked at going there, and they do actually have a pretty good program, but you will not leave that school with a degree.
Sweet. Well, he left it regardless.
No penalty at that point. You just got debt.
Yeah, that's true. We're going to jump around a little bit, but I think I have this correct. You work at the Portland Zoo?
Yeah, it's called the Oregon Zoo. I've worked there for most of my life, actually.
How'd that happen?
Yeah, how it happened, I don't totally know. The origin story is pretty boring, but my mom found out they were hiring when I was a teenager. And it's the kind of job where you have to be a certain kind of crazy to work it, because you're never going to make enough money to live if you're not willing to do a whole diverse array of bizarro tasks, which can be everything from custodial work up to, I mean, whatever you can get in on. I've built things, I paint things, I maintain things, I've worked on construction projects. You just have to be willing to do it. I work with the public. If you're willing to get your hands dirty and go around and do all the different things, unless you're a zookeeper, I should say this is different if you actually work with animals, but I don't work with animals. I don't have that degree. I don't have that skill set. So what I do is I do all the stuff that supports that. It's called operations. And so if you're willing to kind of be everybody's pal and do everything from clean a toilet to repair a gate that holds a polar bear in a pen lock, you might find yourself in a position where they're going to keep you on in the down seasons. And that's what I've been doing for most of my life. And I love it. I get to see cool animals, hang out with an amazing, interesting, and diverse crowd of people, both as coworkers and the visitors. It also affords me the flexibility to do things like podcasting, like filmmaking, like being a parent.
You're a parent? Oh, that's right. I know you're a parent because your son submitted one of the questions in the year-end show.
That's true. He did, yeah.
That's cute. This is a little bit of a tangent, but you guys have tigers at the zoo?
We do, yeah. Yeah, we definitely do.
And how many times in the past 9 months has some a-hole with a mullet taken a picture next to the tiger cage and tried to be all Joe Exotic?
I have no idea. I'm sure somebody probably has.
I would bet on it.
Fortunately, if you want a tangent about tigers, people dramatically underestimate what tigers are capable of. They're actually probably just about the most athletic animal for their size, with the possible exception of polar bears. There was an incident, at least a decade ago in San Francisco, where some people were taunting the tigers, and one of them just jumped out. This was an older cage that had been perfectly serviceable for years, but no one had bothered the kitty enough to get him to really put his leaps into effect. Fortunately, our they're enclosures, our habitat, even though it's actually about the oldest one we have at the zoo, it's built in the 50s, was engineered in such a way that while the tigers can't jump out and destroy human lives, it is hard to get a good picture with our tigers.
Oh, really?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Interesting.
Yeah, they're kind of far from view.
Gotcha.
Our lion exhibit goes viral every once in a while because we have a big sheet of glass that the lionesses can come right up to. And they're really into your kids. They really want to see what the kid's all about. If you dress your kid like a zebra, put them in any kind of black and white striped ensemble, you're going to have 3 or 4 lionesses who might be very interested in your child and checking him or her out.
No kidding.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Wow. Now I want to just show up and dress everybody's kids up like zebras.
Yeah, no, I think it'd work. I think you could bring like a little poncho and just put it on a 3-year-old and be like, hey, let's see what happens.
Oh my gosh, that sounds amazing.
I do that all the time when I bring my friends to the zoo. I like to take our kids, and there's a wire fence for the animals and then a safety fence for the people. And if you take your little kid and hold it up by the cougar exhibit in the Northwest section, which is where I spend most of my time, that cougar will come over and want to investigate your sub-toddler.
That is fantastic. I'm going to start searching for those videos all over the place.
Oh, you will. You'll see them, especially the ones with the lionesses. It'll come up real fast on the Google search.
Nice. So at what point did you decide that you were going to stay there? And what I mean is, you said you've been working there most of your life. At what point, or was there a point where you decided, you know what, this is what I'm going to do?
So my other career I've had is working in kitchens. And in 2013, I was lured away to work in a big industrial kitchen. And I still kept on at part-time at the zoo, but I took a full-time job, in basically a food factory, more or less, preparing meals for a kind of upscale grocery store chain. Whew, it was soul-crushing work, and I didn't care for it. I won't go into all the things I didn't like about it. That'd be pretty boring. But basically, I decided I needed to get out. I called my old boss back, asked if I could get put back on the schedule, and within minutes of being back there, this would have been like 2015, I had this epiphany that there's something about being here that I genuinely love, even though it doesn't pay the best, and it's kind of a dead-end job. But, being around cool animals all day and, forming relationships with those animals and with their keepers is really rewarding for me. And I kind of suspect that no matter what happens, I'll always have some relationship with the Oregon Zoo. If all my dreams came true and I was the most successful filmmaker and podcaster in the world, I'd still probably pick up a shift once in a while just to go check out the scene.
Nice. That's really cool. So it sounds like, by the time you had been gone for a little bit and then came back full time, it sounds like when you got there, you were like, oh, this is what home feels like. I'm supposed to be here.
Yeah, very much. And when you're working every day and you're dealing with, the day-to-day BS that is your job, and then you're also trying to, make ends meet, it's easy to lose sight of that. But going away for a while and coming back made me realize, actually it's worth it. The struggle's worth it.
Sure. I can dig it. Tell me about your previous filmmaking projects. I know that you have Contactee, which is either out now or about to be out. Now, by the time this comes out, it'll probably be available on Amazon. Yeah,
at least on Amazon, it should be available, yeah.
Well, real quick, tell everybody what Contactee is about.
Sure. So Contactee is a movie. It is a science fiction thriller.
This is a full-length feature film, right?
Yeah, it's 90 minutes long. It's a feature film. And it's about a psychologist. He's a clinical therapist, and he is given a patient who she's serving a suspended sentence, which means she's committed an act of criminality. And in lieu of jail time, she's been institutionalized. And her doctor cannot get her to give up delusions of having been abducted by aliens her whole life. And this doctor believes that this therapist, Jay Rossi, he's kind of our main character, can use talk therapy to work through her issues around this. But as they speak, and we see this mainly in flashbacks, he becomes a believer. He thinks that she's telling the truth, and he honestly breaks some ethical boundaries and kind of starts falling in love with her. And he hatches this plan that he can basically prove that she's telling the truth by taking her out of the hospital, which he's not supposed to do, and catching an alien abduction on camera by wiring the house with spy equipment. And so they abscond together. They go up to this house in the mountains where they know it's primed to happen. He gets the place all wired with different cameras and things, and they just kind of wait. But the idea is that the more he pushes against this phenomenon, the more it pushes back and things begin to get really strange really fast. That's probably all I should say. I probably spoiled too much already.
I agree. You did spoil it. Now nobody needs it. Just kidding. Everybody's going to watch it. That sounds amazing.
Hey, Streetwalkers. Here's a word from our sponsors.
Contactee is the new movie from me, Vincent Caldoni. When therapist Jay Rossi is assigned a patient who claims to have been abducted by aliens, her story wins him over. Her tales begin to take on an aura of truth rather than insane delusion, and he concocts a plan to confront the alien intelligence. He absconds with her to a cabin in the mountains to document the phenomenon, prove that she is not crazy. But see, here's the thing. Messing with an otherworldly intelligence proves to be more dangerous than either Jay or his patient could have ever foreseen. Contactee is a heady thriller, more focused on ideas than CGI, and loaded with twists. For more details, visit contacteemovie.com.
Let's get back into it.
Now, this is not your first dive into filmmaking. It might be your first full-length feature, but you've been doing short films and other things for a while, right?
Yeah, I think I directed my first film in like 1999, and I'd been acting as a kid, as a student, since the mid-90s. You know, I did a short film called The Accordion in 2004.
Hey, what was that about? Just kidding.
It was about an accordion. It was about a hotel maid with an accordion. I think you can watch it on the internet.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Probably my biggest successes have come as a music video director. In 2007, I directed a video called The Rifle for a folk singer named Alila Diane. That took off mostly in Europe. And through that, I got to meet the wonderful gentlemen of the progressive metal band Gojira. And I did a music video for them in 2016, which was huge. It's probably the biggest thing I've done. I don't know. It's in the teens of millions of views right now, I think. So, and it's been played on television and stuff. So that was really cool.
Very cool. What song was it so we can all look it up and see your work?
It's called Stranded by Gojira.
And that's Gojira?
Yeah, like the Japanese word for Godzilla.
Don't Godzilla me, Holmes.
Oh, are you a G fan?
No, I'm just kidding. I don't.
So we could do the rest of this podcast just talking about Godzilla films.
Oh, well, we can't. But the last episode of 2020 of my show, I had the founding bass player of Blue Oyster Cult on there.
Oh, nice.
He let me play their smash hit Godzilla.
Oh, nice.
So that was fun.
Yeah, it's a good one.
So tell me about the film festival circuit. How often do you submit something and how hard is it to get accepted? And then also, does that mean you have to travel all over the place to be where it's at?
Sure. So to answer that question, I'm going to have to answer it in the before times. One of the issues we're having with Contactee is that COVID just changed the landscape for festivals, for screenings, for everything, for releasing a film in ways that affect all of us, from down to the little tiny guys like me up to the major studios. So everything's in flux right now with that. But in the past, the way that I've had to do it is you have to be super strategic. It is easier to spend money on film festivals than it is on set.
Really?
Yeah, you can go on to something like Film Freeway or whatever. There's all these different submissions. Without a Box was the old one. And you can go onto these sites and you can spend $10,000 in a matter of minutes submitting to film festivals. And mostly what you're doing, like, if you went in your garden and dug a hole and put all of your bank account into that hole and covered it up, you'd probably get more out of it than submitting to film festivals.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. What a great business model.
It is. Yeah, I'm not going to lie. If you want to make money, Steve, and you just have no morals, start a film festival.
Deal.
You won't make a lot of money, but you will be able to get submissions from all over the world and reject them all. It's quite easy.
And just keep their money?
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I live in a small town outside of San Antonio. It's called Berne. It's spelled Boerne. It's a German word, but it's pronounced Berne. And so maybe I'll start a film festival called Berne Man.
Oh, yeah. I think you could do that. I'm not going to lie. There are so many great film festival directors and film festivals who do their best to take care of the filmmakers, who really care about screening things. And every penny they collect goes to the theater rental, goes to the swag, goes to putting it on. But I do know that there are scam festivals out there that are just there to get entry fees. But not to say that's the majority of them. That paints an unfair picture. But I'm unfortunately a little bit cynical because if you get 10%, if you have a 10% hit rate as a film festival entry and you don't have a major film with like even a small studio or whatever backing, you don't have any names in your picture. If you were running at 10%, I would say you deserve props. You're doing better than I've ever done.
And so does that mean a 10% accepted into film festivals?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. And from everything I can gather, that's a pretty good hit rate. So if you want to take like the major film festival, right? So you're talking like Sundance, Tribeca, TIFF, South by Southwest, like those bigger ones like that. And of course, you get things like that are more invitation only, like Venice or Cannes, Berlinale. But like at any film festival with like open submissions, what I've heard from directors and programmers is that the big ones only leave about 10% of screen time open for something that isn't already been arranged from inside.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So you're competing against really good stuff because so much of it's already been blocked out because frickin' Weinstein Company or whatever, I guess they're not really around as much anymore, but some studio or some independent studio or some booker or some agent or some inside thing has already said, you're going to put this film up either because it's got stars in it or has a director that we're trying to promote or because it's something special and we really think that you should put it on and it slips through without having to come in through the front door, as I think is, at least that's what I call it. I believe it's called that, we just submit, cold submission. So you're really in a hard spot to compete for that if you're an unknown filmmaker and you're going to be really facing an uphill battle. And I think in the recent years, I think the smartest filmmakers realized that the festival circuit is not the golden gate to success that it used to be. And that there are other models via the internet, via, what they call four-walling, where you screen your own film for people that could be at least part of a strategy for getting your film out there and finding your audience.
Now, four-walling is where you take your film around the country and rent out little small theaters and then play the film yourself?
So that's the traditional definition of four-walling, but there are other ways to four-wall a film. So there are internet platforms that they're kind of the modern form of four-walling. So, for example, there was a comedian a few years ago who released his special just through a website. That's sort of digital four-walling. There's also broadcast four-walling. There are smaller local affiliates, if you want to put your thing on TV, who will, if you buy out the time, they'll sell you back the ad revenue. That's an old school form of broadcast four-walling that I've heard of. I've never done that. I don't know anyone who's done that, but I've heard of it.
Gotcha.
I guess that's a complicated way to say that four-walling is more than just renting out a theater, though I think that is still the majority of four-wall screenings. And back in the 2000s, we did four-wall screenings that were actually, we were able to make our budget back on a movie doing that.
Really? That's fantastic.
Yeah. Just going around to small towns in the Northwest and setting up a screening and, not that many people would come. But if it was a inexpensive theater rental, which some of them, at least back in the day, were, you might make a little bit of money, and you do that enough times, suddenly you broke even on your little film that you made from the bottom of your heart.
I bet that coming up this year, you could probably get some pretty inexpensive theater time.
Yeah, geez. But, one of the models I guess I would point to is there's another movie that was a micro-budget science fiction film. It's not called Contactee, called Vast of Night, which I believe was made in Texas. I might be wrong about that.
My wife and I watched that probably during COVID.
Yeah, it came out during COVID.
Well, then that'd be it.
So that guy just basically, he had a film. It was getting a lot of festival rejections. COVID was stymieing his ability to get that released. It didn't have a studio or big stars attached. So he got that sucker up on Amazon Prime, did a little promotion, and it really took off via word of mouth. So I think that's a model for things like that. You have to be craftier than just, I'll put it on Amazon. When you find something that has a niche market and you can get it to people a lot easier than before, I think that helps to make up for some of the constriction in the film festival world.
Got you. What is supposed to be the point? What is the goal of a film festival? Like, why would you, Vincent Caldoni, a filmmaker, want to get into a film festival? To what end?
That's a great question. So it depends on the kind of film festival. There are film festivals where you submit to be seen, right? You just want people to see your work. Hopefully they're people who are in the industry or maybe just have deep pockets and might want to help you finance another project or give you a job of some kind. I'm working on whatever they're working on. But, you also you want it to get watched, just have eyes on the project. The other one, which is always kind of the gold standard, is film festivals with an attached market. And this is where distributors of different types will show up, watch the screenings, and then there will be a set time and place in which they are interested in purchasing the rights to a film. Most of the major film festivals have an attached market with them. That's a big deal. I mean, that's the kind of thing where if a bidding war lights off, you could walk away as a filmmaker with a couple $1 million in your pocket, just in a day of conversations with people. Those, of course, are the hardest ones to get into. And of course, the vast majority of films do not get picked up for distribution. No one walks away after a bidding war with millions of dollars in their personal bank accounts. But that can happen there. And so those are the more prestigious and difficult to get into ones. And then beyond that, there are ones, and this is, I think, more of an older model, where there is a prize. And the prize could be money, although usually it's more sort of getting the statue. They call them laurels, right? So like if you win Best Picture in a juried film festival that's respected, like if you win, Palme d'Or at Cannes, even if you don't get picked up for distribution in that moment, which you probably would, but even if you didn't, having that laurel is such a big deal that when you speak to representatives, buyers, distributors, you're going to have so much more momentum behind you. Getting a Palme d'Or, getting some kind of jury prize at Sundance, it just gives you the swagger that when you walk into that meeting, you say, look, I won the Palme d'Or at Cannes. I got, Best in Show in Venice. I got a jury prize at Sundance. I'm a big deal. This movie's a big deal. That really will help you along your way. And so one thing to consider is if the film festival also acts as some kind of competition, the quote unquote laurel that they award, does that have meaning? That would be a good reason to take a big gamble on a film festival. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes 100% sense. Thanks for clearing that up.
Oh, yeah.
Let us move on from that. Obviously, Contactee, hopefully, like we mentioned earlier, it's going to be on Amazon. Do you know if it's going to be free for Prime members or?
That is my intention.
Okay.
Unless there's something internal to Amazon. So let's say this way. If it ends up not being free, it's going to be the lowest cost I can possibly get it at. And that will be Amazon's doing, not my own. That makes sense?
Yeah, it does. It does make sense. Like, do you get paid for that?
Sort of. So I've been in conversations with different streaming networks to try to find a home for Contactee. And it's been a arduous and complex and frustrating process. Amazon has a little bit of a different model with Prime. YouTube has a similar deal set up where basically anyone can upload virtually anything and it's monetized based on viewership. That's not a good way to earn your budget back. That's not a good way to make money. So that's why I was talking about it will either be on free for Prime members or at the lowest price point I can possibly rig it to, because at that point that you're putting it up on Prime where you don't have a specific distribution deal through Amazon, your end of that, your monetization is going to be low enough that you are all but giving it away from your end. Not necessarily from Amazon's end, but from your end. So I'm making a kind of frightening deal with the Bezos devil. He'll make money off of my product, my creativity, and my hard work before I see a dime. But it is a way for more people to be able to see it. So that's why I want it to be as widely available as cheaply as possible, because I'm doing this to get eyes on my work, on the work of my crew and my collaborators, more than to earn a living. I don't have a lot of hope through the present presented streaming models that it's going to do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that sounds about right. I think that's sort of the way like Apple Music works. Like if you sell a song on Apple Music, let's just say 99 cents. Mm-hmm. I think Apple gets 67 cents of that 99 cents or something like that.
Yeah, that's what I've heard, that it's like 30 cents. And actually, Apple has one of the better deals running
What a weird world.
Right. Well, okay. So not as many people buy music as stream music, but Spotify is just a vacuum that takes creative content.
Yeah, it's like a fraction of a penny or something. It's terrible.
It's really small. We live in a world where the distribution model for creative content has changed really dramatically, but the distributors of the media still have a lot of power over content. And that's always been that way, and it probably always will be that way. I do think that there may need to come a point, and I may be an old man before anything like this happens, where we have to reckon with the idea that content creators, in order to be able to just live enough to put out work, we may need to look at different models than we have right now so that it's maybe less profitable for the companies, but that there is something that can give you a little more of a career. So that there's an incentive to make content for these people. And right now, I think that's the last thing on, the big tech companies' minds. But I have a suspicion that down the road, as the market begins to fragment and there's more competition for content and specific content, niche content, especially more than just like the stuff I do have a feeling that in order to have the kind of perpetual growth that they want, they are going to have to incentivize content creators in different ways. I don't know if that'll be a better thing or a worse thing because, no one ever knows, but it will be interesting to see how that unfolds. Because, especially since COVID-19, more digital content has been consumed in the last year than ever before, and not by a little bit. People are inhaling content at unprecedented rates. And with the difficulties in production and all of the different things that are part of the COVID universe, there's a struggle to keep up and supply people with what they would like to see. I would love to see a little more power one day put into the hands of creators, not necessarily creatively, but just more of an incentive to get up and do these things, right? Like if Amazon has all this money and they really want to dominate the streaming market, cut a better deal for content creators and they will flock to you. And that is an opportunity to make more money and best competition. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Along the lines of what you were saying about during COVID, everybody has been watching everything. I think that I heard maybe last week that everybody is watching everything, so much so that they're running out of stuff to watch. And so now people are watching stuff from other countries. Like I think there's a limited series or a 4-part, whatever. There's a show on Netflix. I think it's in the top 10 in the nation right now. It's called Lupin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And either my TV is broken or that is not filmed in English and it's just dubbed.
Hopefully you have an option to watch it subtitled.
I don't know. I didn't check into that, but I did notice that the lips aren't making even remotely the same movements that they would be saying those words in English. Because it takes place in France, so I'm going to assume that it is filmed in French.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's nobody that I've ever seen in it before, which leads me to believe that this is a foreign property. And so, like I said, I think it's number 10 or something like that in the country or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, so everybody ran out of everything, watched everything from America. So now people are watching like Korean stuff and Japanese stuff and, European stuff, like just stuff from everywhere else.
Yeah, I'm no different. And for me, anyway, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I've really gotten into watching essays on film that are put on YouTube just because I'm out of shows I like to watch, out of movies that are available at an affordable price that I want to check up on. I can only rewatch all my classics so many times. So I've been watching, essays on filmmaking on YouTube. And that was not something I did before the pandemic, but it's been great. I love it. It took a pandemic to kind of force me out of my shell and go check that stuff out.
Nice. I think the pandemic has done that for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Hey, Streetwalkers, here's a word from our sponsors.
Texas has a reputation for being tough on crime, but beneath the surface, buried in the darkness that only those affected by tragedy know, is the reality of a flawed and insufficient justice system. More than 60% of violent crimes in Texas go unsolved, and many are at the hands of offenders who should have never had the opportunity, madmen who slipped through the cracks. On Gone Cold Podcast, Texas True Crime, you'll find in-depth accounts of unsolved homicides, missing persons cases, and other mysteries throughout Texas. From the historic and perplexing case of the 1948 disappearance of a Denton co-ed, Virginia Carpenter, to the unthinkable, the Orange, Texas abduction and murder of 4-year-old Denaria Finley in 2002. You can find and subscribe to Gone Cold, Texas True Crime, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Let's get back into it.
Switching gears again, a few years ago, my daughter told me, hey, there's this podcast you should check out. It was called Thinking Sideways. And I was like, oh, okay, that sounds dope. And so I listened to a couple and I was like, you know what? These fools are awesome. I should interview all three of them.
Awesome.
And it took a little bit of, I guess, patience and finagling, but I was able to interview all three of them.
Oh, nice.
And those three hosts were in order. It was Steve, Joe, and then Devin. Now, Joe from Thinking Sideways, I've actually had him on a couple of times, I think, and we've become, fairly decent friends, I think. We're buddies. One of the episodes of Thinking Sideways, it was a mysterious murder, suicide thing, whatever, that happened in my little town in Bernie.
Oh, cool.
About 5 miles from my house. And so one day when I had absolutely nothing to do, I went out to the scene of that whatever happened there, and I had him on the phone directing me where I should look for this and where I should. It was so much fun.
That's awesome.
It was a blast. But I said all that to say that show ended right around the time that I had all those folks on, and I'm going to say it had nothing to do with me. They were on their way out anyway.
They were. They planned it a long way in advance. Don't blame yourself.
Yeah, they did. Oh, thanks. But Joe from Thinking Sideways, well, he got together with a little fella named Vincent Caldoni, and they started a podcast called The Shocking Details. How did you meet Joe, and first, how did you meet Joe?
At a Thinking Sideways meetup. So one of my interests in life is Sasquatch lore. I love the Bigfoot.
I'm going to interrupt you. I've heard you talk about the Bigfoot before, and every time you talk about the Bigfoot, you say the Bigfoot. Why don't you just say Bigfoot? Do you think there was just one?
I have no idea. I actually don't like calling it the Bigfoot or Bigfoot.
You prefer Squatch? Okay,
so if I really had a preference, no one would know what I was talking about. If I really had a preference, we would call it Saskatz, which is the native term. So the thing I like about Sasquatch lore is that it predates Western settlement by thousands of years. And in all of this obsession that people have over lame footprints and badly filmed videos, we gloss over what I think is actually the juiciest stuff, which is, I could take up all your time today talking about it, but I will abridge myself. But that's digging into this lore and how it connects to so many other natural phenomena that has happened in the Pacific Northwest, and how myth making and myth keeping in Native American culture from around here, what they call the myth time, is so important to keeping a record of the natural sciences, of the progression of natural history and anthropology. And Saskatz, the Bigfoot, fits into that. It's a small piece, but it fits into that. And it's an interesting way of taking these fun stories that almost everyone in the Pacific Northwest who's had family here or who's lived here for a significant amount of time is going to have a Bigfoot story, and then connecting that to something deeper. And I wanted to talk about that with Thinking Sideways. So I walked up to Devin, and I was like, I want to talk to you guys about the Sasquatch. And she rolled her eyes and said, talk to Joe. and that's how I met Joe.
So when did you two decide to get together and do this podcast, The Shocking Details?
I don't know. There's not like a fun story around that. They always talked about the chupacabra. And to make a long story short, or a short story long, I don't know which, we had an animal at the zoo named Chupacabra. He had a really fun origin story where in a relatively small town in Oregon, a road crew, which I believe were Hispanic men, noticed an oddball animal running through a field. And they went over to take a look, and it was nothing they'd ever seen before. And so they called, I don't know, Fish and Wildlife or somebody, and said, there's a chupacabra running around. And the lady from Fish and Wildlife shows up, and she goes out, and she managed to trap him somehow. And she looked at it and said, what is that? I don't know what that thing is. This is a professional, and she had no idea what she was looking at. And so she calls the zoo, and she goes, well, I'm here at the Fish and Wildlife headquarters, and I've got a chupacabra I need you to help me identify. And it turned out to be a Patagonian mara that someone had kept as a pet. So basically, it's a guinea pig built on the frame of a small deer. And his name, because we didn't know his name became Chupacabra, and he became a resident of the Oregon Zoo. So I managed to get the Thinking Sideways people a tour of the Chupacabra enclosure and got them to come and give him some scratches and hang out with him. He's very sweet. He's very friendly. So that was while Thinking Sideways was still going. And Joe said to me while we were hanging out at the zoo, the podcast is ending. And I said, oh, that's too bad. So we started having coffee and just talking about stuff. And eventually our podcast evolved out of that.
Gotcha. Now, for those who aren't yet subscribed to the Shocking Details podcast, tell everybody what they might find. Now, me personally, I've never missed an episode.
Oh, really? Oh, that's so awesome.
Yes, absolutely. Tell the Fascination Streetwalkers what they might find on the Shocking Details.
So the sort of catchphrase is histories, mysteries, true crime, and tales of the paranormal. But the idea for me that kind of came from it was looking at old tabloid newspapers from, sort of the mid-century, and how if it was something strange, if it was something that would kind of make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, they'd cover it. It didn't matter if it was a grisly homicide or a UFO sighting. They were interested in that kind of odd thing that made you want to, read past the front page and flip to the back to get the rest of the details. That was kind of the idea for me anyway. I don't know what Joe was thinking, but basically if there's something out there that is difficult to understand, whether it's an unsolved crime or a bit of lore or just some type of mystery. For example, last week we covered a geological mystery because there's a land formation in India and Sri Lanka that no one knows how it got there. And there's a lot of different explanations for it. So it could be something from that up to unsolved crimes or disappearances, things like that. So we'd keep a really broad spectrum, but the whole idea is kind of that whole thing where you want to dig in, you want the details. You don't want to just hear like, this happened. You want to know, if you want to chase down the rabbit hole, that's the story that we want. That makes sense?
It does, and since I have listened to every episode, and I agree with your sentiment that the subject matter is a little bit varied, but they all have one thing in common, and that is the story on its surface, just like the bare bones of the story that you're covering, makes the listener, and probably you, say, what the shit?
Yeah.
And then you guys dive right into it and try and figure out exactly what the shit.
Right.
And one of the things that I think sets your show apart from, other shows that would be like that is the format. So what you guys do, listeners, what they do is they bring up a story, for instance, this geological mystery. So they bring up a story and they explain every aspect of the facts, and then they talk about some of the people's opinions who are either investigating or involved with the story, opinions about what happened or how something happened. But then I feel like the very last thing that you guys do is y'all have a whole section dedicated to just bouncing ideas off of each other,
right,
trying to come up with some alternate suggestions of maybe what happened or why something happened, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's called the theory section. And so the way I look at it, right, so if you hear about a mysterious thing in the world, right, you're going to want to get more perspectives on it. That's what following obnoxious comment threads on Reddit is, to me anyway. That's how I look at that, right? You want perspective, even ones that maybe aren't the best, but just more to think about. And that's the whole idea is like, we're going to set it up, we're going to explain it, and then we're going to kick around our own thoughts and opinions and ideas and other stuff we've read, even stuff we don't embrace. For me, that's interesting. That lights up my brain when I think like, oh, right, maybe it wasn't a serial killer. Maybe it was a wild animal. Oh, maybe it wasn't an alien. Maybe it was an interdimensional traveler. Whenever you can, get more thoughts and more ideas around it, that's when you start really, I think, for me anyway, start having a good time. That's that metaphor I was thinking of with the newspaper, right? You put just the facts on the front page, and then you want to leave just enough of a hook that you're going to flip through and look at all the cool advertisements to get to A7, where they've got all of the background information and all of the shocking details kept away from you to keep you reading. And I always want to have the kind of story that makes you want to do all that inconvenient flipping to get to the backstory, to get to the comments, get to the theories.
That makes sense. Real quick, listeners, a newspaper was an old-timey... Just kidding.
No, I was thinking about it, like actually just what I was saying that about how like there are going to be some people, younger people, who aren't familiar with it. Like, what's the problem with flipping to A7? Well, newspapers folded in the middle, and they're like kind of tall, and especially if you're seated, it can be a little bit of a pain in the butt to like flip through, and that takes extra motivation. It's like some people aren't going to get that.
Yeah, and I mean, for those who might not get that, it's sort of like when you unfold a giant map.
Yeah.
Oh, well, what a map is stupid.
I know.
All right. Well,
and none of it matters.
This is, oh man, I hate to do this, but we're up against it here, Vincent.
Oh, yeah, no.
So everybody definitely go check out The Shocking Details. Like I said, and I'm totally serious. I've never missed an episode. I look forward to it every week. I think you all will too, especially if you're a listener of this show. I think that you are in the mindset to get to know more about other things and not just people, about these weird, mysterious, and quirky things that happen all through time and all over the world. It's a very engaging show. You guys will love it. So definitely check that out. It's available everywhere where podcasts are available. It's called The Shocking Details Podcast. And again, I want everybody to run to your Amazon box and find Contactee.
Yeah.
I'm very much looking forward to it. I've heard 1 or 2 advertisements for it, and I'm very much looking forward to it, so I can't wait. And I hate to do this, but before I let you go, Vincent, is there anything we didn't talk about or I didn't tell you about that you wanted to talk about today?
So I got 2 small things.
Do it.
If you're having any trouble locating the film and where to see it when you hear this, go to www.contacteemovie.com, and I will post all the places that are screening it. So that's that.
Perfect.
The other thing I wanted to ask you, and I apologize, I have not listened to every episode of your show. You may have answered this, but is your podcast named after a song by The Cure?
By the what?
The Cure.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
Yes,
Okay.
it is. Yeah.
Big fan. I love that record. So that was it. I just had to ask before I let
amazing.
you go.
Actually, another podcaster named Phil Rossi, he's a writer and also a musician, and he provided sort of a 9 Inch Nails techno version of that song, and it is one of my favorite songs that I've ever heard in my whole life. It's part of the outro of my show, but in the actual Phil Rossi episode, I do play the entire song. Well, it's amazing. It's really cool.
All right, I'm going to tell you a quick story that you probably want to cut, but if you want to use it, you can. When I was in high school, a hard rock band was working on a cover of that, and they wanted me to play it at the high school talent show. I was acting at the time, and they wanted, in like high school plays, and they wanted me to do a cover of that in like full Robert Smith hair and makeup, like the white paint and everything.
Yeah.
And they wanted me to step in and be the singer for that. They thought I had something that would work for that. And I loved that song. I loved that record, and I wanted to do it, but I did have to tell them, guys, I cannot sing. Never happened.
That's fantastic. Vincent, where can people find you on social media?
The best way to find me, if you look up Vincent Caldoni, I have a Filmmaker page on Facebook, and then on Twitter, V Caldoni, Vincent Caldoni International Airport. And then you can also find us, I think, just by Googling Shocking Details. We have the Shocking Details Facebook page where we have actually pretty great discussions, a pretty great community. And then we have our Twitter page. Eventually, we will get that Reddit page we've been promising up and running.
Awesome. Well, Vincent Caldoni, filmmaker of Contactee and co-host of the Shocking Details podcast, thank you so much for taking the time out of your COVID-filled busy day to hang out and let us get to know you a little bit better, man. I appreciate it.
Right on. Well, this was a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.
And you have a great rest of your day, man. Have a good weekend.
Yeah, same with you, Steve. Thanks.
All right. Take it easy, man. Bye.
Bye.
Hey, Streetwalkers. It's time for a giveaway. Thanks to our generous friends at Sylvania, we're going to give away some Bluetooth speakers. What do you think? These are fairly special and limited Fascination Street podcast edition, as they have a little Fascination Street emblem on the end. This oblong Bluetooth speaker is about 8 inches tall and about 3 inches in diameter, and is IPX4 waterproof. So how do you win? Well, what I need all of you to do is post a short video to your Instagram story, your Facebook story, or even your TikTok, telling everybody why you love Fascination Street Podcast and which is your favorite episode. Make sure to tag the show in these videos, and each week I'll pick one winner to win one of these special limited edition Sylvania Bluetooth speakers, and I'll mail it to you. And I might even throw a couple of other Fascination Street pod swag in there as well. So tell a friend, tell all your friends, and include it in your stories on Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok. And don't forget to tag the show. Fascination Street podcast. Opening music is the song Magnolia from the 2014 album Intransigence, used with permission from Douglas Miles Clark. Closing music is Apollo from the 2001 album Into the Known by the band Sapphire. Thanks for hanging out with us and getting to know a little bit about our guest. We'll see you next time on Fascination Street.